So in this video, we're going to show you the processes needed to install the perfect Tobermoor driveway. So before starting your driveway project, it's important to be aware of any planning and water drainage regulations in your area. It's essential and a must that you check out all the services in your driveway, i.e. gas, water, electric, and even oil. To install a driveway correctly, you will need the following tools, equipment, and PPE. Some other materials you may need. In this situation, we're using an MOT Type 1, or what you would know as 40mm to dust or blinded. Sharp sand for the laying course, kiln dry sand for jointing the blocks, sand and cement for concreting the curbs. You may also require drainage channels and recessed manhole covers. All these materials can be purchased from your local builders merchants. The first stage is to excavate the area to the required depth. To calculate the depth of the excavation required, add the depth of the block paver, 30mm thickness of sharp sand and laying course, and the depth of your sub base. A typical driveway will require a sub base of between 125mm and 150mm depending on your ground conditions. If the ground is soft, you will require a greater depth of sub base. Always ensure the finished level of the driveway is at least 150mm below the damp proof course of the house. When installing a driveway, it's so important to maintain the integrity of the driveway in itself. And we do this by using edge restraints. In this case, the edge restraints are a Tobermoor Tegler Curb Large. To ensure the alignment and the finish level, we're using a string line. It's so important that your curbs are installed correctly. In this case, we're using a 6:1 mix, 6 sharp, 1 cement as a semi-dry. That semi-dry is going to ensure that your blocks don't tilt one way or another way, and when you tap them down, they stay in place. We've got our mortar on our curb brace now, and we've got to make sure that when we're tapping down sufficiently enough to ensure that there's a good bed underneath. Try and hold your curb in position like so, tapping it down with your mallet, but always make sure and ensure that you use a bolt level, because your bolt level is going to make sure that the top of your curb is touching your line. And you need to get down and have a look and see what you're doing. Well, here we are. We've laid our curbs, they're in place, but now we want the curbs to stay in position. And we do that by putting a concrete mix on the back of the curbs, haunching it off, smoothing it off, ensuring you don't get any sideways movement. Now we can install the sub-base layer. For a 150mm depth of sub-base, you should install 2 75mm layers. Spread the first layer of aggregate and rake it level. Compact it fully using a vibrating plate compactor. It is important to lay your paving with a slight fall. This means laying it to a very slight slope to allow surface water to run off the surface to drainage gullies, channels, or soft landscaping. For block paving on a driveway, this is usually a minimal fall of 1 in 60. This means 1 centimetre of fall for every 60 centimetres of distance. This means if your driveway is 5 metres long, you should convert this to mm, 5,000 millimetres, and divide by 60, which means the driveway will fall 85 millimetres approximately over its length. This fall should be created in the sub-base, not the laying course. To create the fall in the sub-base, place a string line on the finished level of the driveway at the highest point, and run it to a stake at the lower end of the driveway. Use a string line spirit level to check its level. At the low end of the driveway, measure down the string line 80 millimeters. Place a wooden peg at this level. This now indicates where the sub-base material needs to be brought up to. You can do these in various locations on the driveway to guide you. So here we are. We've got a sub-base in place. It's compacted, and now it's time to put in our bedding course. For this, we're going to be using a sharp sand, and it's so important that your sharp sand has enough moisture content. And the best way to test that, to see if it forms a ball. So what Dave's doing here now, he's setting in the screed rails. The screed rails he's using in this case is a 30mm rail. What that 30mm rail will do to ensure that he uses the correct depth of sand that is required for the bedding course. So as you can see, Dave's got the rails firmly in place. He's packing the sand either side of the rail to ensure that we don't get any movement. But what we need to do now, we need to use a string line from A to B, and to ensure that we haven't got any sagging in the rails throughout the distance. So what we're doing now, Dave is ensuring that the rail is to the correct height with the string line. So what Dave has done now, he's set up the second line from threshold to threshold. He's got the screed rail underneath that line, and he's checking that we have the correct depth. Right, okay, so what we have here now, you can see the laying course slowly coming to life. We've got the two screeding rails either side running parallel, and Dave is using a screeding bar and floating as he goes to achieve the required level. And as you can see, he's pulling the screeding bar over the screeding rails as he goes, and it's leaving a perfectly smooth finish. So what we're doing now, we're pulling the screed rail back and it's creating a void. So we put the extra sand in to ensure that there's no voids in our laying course. And what we're doing in this case, we're using a plastic float to ensure a good level. Filling the void as we go. These are the Shannon Duo 50mm block, perfect for a driveway. Comes in two different sizes, the rectangle and the square. These need to be laid in an alternate format. Well, as you can see, Dave and Ryan are making rapid progress and it's looking good, but it's important that you don't have any straight joints. So we need to create some contrast with this driveway, and we're going to do that with the Sienna Silver sets. Absolutely beautiful. So important, as you lay in your driveway, you've got to make sure you've got the correct level. When laying a block, you need to lay it nice and square in this format right the way down. What we don't want to be doing is laying our block at an angle like this, creating that indentation underneath, creating a void. Then your driveway is going to just run out. My top tip when installing your Tobermoor driveway is to check the alignment of your paving every metre or so with a string line. So we've got our full-size blocks in, but we have a cut on this one side. So probably the easiest way to do a cut is to take the previous laid block out, like so. Place the block that you're going to cut in the hole, and then overlay with the previous cut block. Mark across like so. We know that this is our waste. We put an X on that for waste. Place our block back in. We don't want to be tripping over. This is a conventional block splitter. Place the block underneath to the line. Tighten up. And remember to put the block at an angle so you undercut. There we have it. Well, we finished laying the driveway using the Shannon slate block paving and also the contrasting silver sienna sets. So important when you're brushing in your granite sand, you need to do it at a 45. This will ensure that you're not brushing the sand out of the joint. And remember, wear your mask. It's so important when using a compactor plate that you use a rubber mat. This will ensure that you won't damage or scratch the surface of your paving. Well, now we're going to give our driveway a final compaction to achieve the correct height, but it's so important that you don't forget your PPE, ear defenders, glasses, but more importantly, your mask. Well, it's done, and all that's left to do is to brush off the sand, and we've completed. It may be necessary in the near future to come back and just top up with some sand in some of the joints if necessary. So as you can see, the driveway is completed. I'm sure you'll agree it looks absolutely fantastic. We've completed this driveway using the Shannon Duo slate block paving, also with a contrasting sienna silver set. This driveway is perfect for the modern contemporary home, also the traditional.